Hello. Jafreen, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. If anybody's watching, this is the AAWW Asian American Writers Workshop Fireside Chat. Do you go by double A double W?
Oh wow, that's like a tongue twister. No, I sometimes people have tried to say AAWW. I feel like that's a mouthful.
A
Um,
squared, W squared. They're all long.
there's a lot. It's a lot of syllables, but
Yeah.
we end up just going with the workshop.
The workshop. Wow. That's like
Yeah.
kind of cocky in a good way. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We just like cut off the rest of the words and we just, the workshop.
No,
And
I like that. Every other workshop has to do their full name, but
right.
you
We
just,
don't need that. We've
yeah,
got enough street
Iowa
cred.
Writers Workshop is like nothing
Yeah,
compared to this.
exactly. Exactly.
Amazing. Wow. How long have you been working for the workshop?
So I was appointed as executive director in January 2020. So we were in the office for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then everything shut down for COVID, and we've been operating remotely. But yeah, my tenure has actually been pretty much completely through COVID.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. Did you see that coming? Because I guess in January, we sort of had an idea that there was a pandemic on the horizon, but not enough that it would be this bad.
We were a little bit ahead of the curve, but totally by like coincidence. We've done some things in person, but we're mostly still operating remotely.
Yeah, no, we are too. I realized I should have said I'm Karen. I'm Karen Chee. I'm talking with Jafreen. I'm very excited to be here at AAWW. And yeah, I work at Late Night with Seth Meyers, and we've also been remote since March 2020. You said this could be just a very casual chat, so I'm gonna ask you some casual questions. Who is your least favorite person in the workshop, and why?
Um, wow. I've never been asked that question. Our staff is small, but super mighty, and they care so much about their work and they do such good work. And we get so many comments all the time of like, how do you all do so much with such a small staff? And I think it's just a real testament to everybody that not only is at the workshop presently, but has come through the doors. We're really marked by this community of people who just care about the organization really deeply and really personally. And I'm not a writer. I'm not like a creative person. So for me, it's like fangirl mode of being able to work with and learn from these creative people every day.
Okay, sounds like Lily is your least favorite person. Okay, for everyone watching online, we love Lily. I'm only saying that because I know Lily's also watching this Zoom right now. Oh my gosh. Okay, wait, I have two follow-up questions to that, which is how many people are on your staff? And then before I forget the second question, what if you weren't a writer, how did you end up working for the workshop? But we'll do the first question first.
Yeah. So we have 10 people on staff.
Oh,
That's just kind of like our core staff, but we have a roster of, contributing editors who help with the digital magazine. We have our fellows who are yearly cohorts of our two fellowship programs. So even beyond the small staff, we also have kind of this rotating lineup of people that are part of our everyday work, our day to day. And then, of course, there's the audience and everybody who comes to our events and participates in our events. And one of the things I love about the work that we do is I feel like we're one of the only organizations that really engages with writers at every stage of their career. So we
Mm,
get like baby writers who come in and come to the workshops and like practice their craft and learn how to be a good writer, maybe get published for the first time. And then we have like, as they kind of move up in their career and write their best-selling novel, they come back and they speak at events and they mentor our fellows. And it's this really great, you never really leave the workshop community once you're a part of it.
yeah.
And not in a psychotic way, like in
I
a
was gonna say that
loving,
sounds really cool.
in
Yeah.
a really loving and kind of dedicated way. A lot of my work in kind of curating public programs and thinking about public events and beyond the nuts and bolts of the logistics has always been like, how do we reach new people and how do we reach our audiences? And so in a lot of ways, storytelling has been a part of my career, even if I'm not a writer. So I was in the arts and culture field, just doing kind of fundraising and events. So I remember during the hiring process, I was like, I'm not a writer, I'm not creative, but I know how to run an organization.
You said earlier that the workshop helps writers through all stages of their career. Who's like somebody who was a baby writer that is now a big writer? And also, who is somebody who is a big writer that because of the workshop has decided to quit writing?
I'm gonna not answer the second one, but there's a lot of good examples. So Ming Chang, whose book Bestiary came out, I think 2 years ago and like won a bunch of awards. She's brilliant. Was first published as a 16-year-old in the margins. So her first byline was in our digital magazine. And then, a few years later, her debut which was I think published by One World, came out and won all of the awards. And it's this great example of, again, just kind of nurturing people from start until their book comes out. Sarah Tankham Matthews, whose book was just a finalist for the National Book Awards this past year, was one of our fellows in our fellowship programs. And even, I think this is an example that gets cited often. I hope I get all the names correctly. Minjin Lee, Lisa Ko, and a couple of others who I am forgetting at the time, took a class years ago, way before my time, taught by Jhumpa Lahiri.
Wow.
And so it was this class of people taking this workshop and who ended up being just like really formidable members of like the Asian literary canon.
Yeah. Are there people who are writers that the workshop has not worked with that you wish you could work with? Like, are there people you're trying to reach?
That's a great question. One thing that we're really trying to do is expand kind of the definition of writing and like working across multiple genres. And traditionally literary organizations focus a lot on poetry and fiction. We publish everything from nonfiction to interviews to hybrid formats, translations. But we've also been really slowly working more and more with actually screenwriters and and TV writers, and how do we bring that industry and that form of writing into like our literary fold. We have our annual publishing conference that takes place every year that always have recently a panel on screenwriting. And so I'm really interested in not necessarily even specific writers, but how are we bringing different types of writing into our mix?
Yeah. Wait, you know who would be amazing as a sidebar is this summer I was on the writing staff for season 2 of Pachinko, which you mentioned Minjin Lee is the show based on her novel. And one of the other writers in our room was Chang Ray Lee, who wrote Native Speaker. So I just feel like he's like obviously a genius and he was so smart and like really good at dissecting novels and dissecting fiction, which, obviously you would be very good at it. But it was just incredible to see, as somebody who is not a novelist, to see his perspective on a book and how to adapt that book.
As a TV writer, how do you feel like there's this divide between like literary writing and TV writing, or like have you felt that as somebody who works in TV?
That's such a good question. I mean, I do think they are very different skill sets. I've read some I'm sure bad novels by screenwriters and bad scripts by novelists who are otherwise good at novel writing. And I think it's just they're very different skill sets. But one of the things that someone pointed out to me recently was that very often in a lot of novels, you get to sort of enter the protagonist's mind. And hear their inner monologue and see how they react to things. And it gives them a lot more inherent agency, I guess, in the situations that they're in, or at least a lot more agency is conveyed. Whereas on TV, unless you hear like a voiceover narration, you don't really get that. It really depends on the actor's facial expressions. And so someone was saying that like a big pitfall is when you're adapting a book is putting in a voiceover narration. But of course, like the thing you least want to do while you're watching a movie is hear someone read a bunch of stuff at you. So it like is a fully different skill set, I feel, even if you're trying to adapt the same scenes. Yeah, so that I found really fascinating.
It's really interesting for me. We are in touch with like publishing houses and imprints all the time, especially as they're looking for new talent and scouting for new writers. And I don't know that this would have was happening a few years ago. I feel like it's been happening more and more where we get requests from publishing houses of like, we're looking for, a book about this topic, this genre, this target audience with a lens to being adapted for TV. So it's like
Yeah.
even before a book is being written, people are thinking about not just like writing a book, which used to be like one thing. Now it's writing a book that can eventually be adapted, like that part two for some imprints or some requests is it's being like it's given at the beginning, which has been interesting for us to be a part of and see.
That is so interesting. I wonder, are there books that you've read, maybe that are like, written by people who are in the workshop or people who aren't, but are there books that you've read where you're like, oh, this could be adapted really well into either a movie or a show, but it hasn't yet been adapted?
Some of the most interesting writing that's being done by writers of color specifically are in like the YA, romance, and speculative fiction genres, like actually a little bit outside of literary fiction, right? Those are the genres where I think there's some of the most exciting work happening when you talk about like diversity of authors and identities and all of that. Um, and I also feel like those genres, like who doesn't love a good YA show, right? Like teens are messy and chaotic and makes for great television. And so I feel like a lot of that work lends itself, I would be interested in watching. There was a Pakistani interpretation of Pride and Prejudice that I read recently.
Oh,
Um,
super.
that was so good and I felt like would make such like a cool either movie or TV show. But yeah,
Yeah,
like the YA and the romance genres, I feel like are up there.
yeah. There are so many Pride and Prejudice sort of, inspired, either out of direct adaptations or like loosely inspired things. Do you have a favorite one, or is yours like the original book?
I mean, I do love the original.
Yeah, and I guess it'd be
This
weird if you
yeah,
didn't
this
love
one
it.
that I just read though was I wish I could remember the name. I'm gonna quickly try to find it. Um it was so good and it was the woman who wrote it was or is like a real Austen fan. Unmarriageable by Sonia Kamal.
Oh,
Um
cool. Unmarriageable.
has like studied Jane Austen, is like a huge fan of the books, and you could tell. I feel like when you're a genuine fan of the original, it really shows through in the work. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wait, oh my God. Okay, I fully agree because I was just talking about this recently with a friend. This is super off topic. We can go back to talking about the workshop, but I was just talking with a friend about how the Emma Thompson Sense and Sensibility is like one of the best movies I've ever seen, period.
yeah,
And I think maybe one of the few examples where I love Jane Austen, I love Sense and Sensibility, but I was like, I think as a movie, this is a better film than the book was as a book,
yeah,
which is not even a knock on the book. It's just like it's such a fantastic film and
yeah,
such an incredible piece of work. And she really got the spirit of the book and made it so like alive and beautiful. And everybody seems like a real person, which I feel like is really hard to do in a period drama. And yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Are there people who aren't Asian American, and I'm thinking like Asian British, Asian Australian, or Asian, who you wish you could have at the workshop for like an event? And what kind of an event would you want it to be?
Oh my gosh, Bollywood dance party with
Oh my God.
all
Yeah. We could
like
do a Bride and Prejudice Bollywood dance party.
all our fundraising gala for the year could just be like a Bollywood dance party with every Bollywood star like coming in and that's like a that's just me and my personal preference, not really thinking about the workshop's audience, but I feel like it would be a big hit. I feel like people would be really into it.
Oh
Um,
yeah, for sure. That would be so exciting.
what I've
The work.
loved is like a lot, especially in recent times, as Bollywood stars like get married, they turn into these big public events. Like people are like watching every update of how these like celebrities are getting married and the parties that they're having and whatever. And I love them because it's like there's so much. It feels like they'd be so much fun to party with.
Mm.
Like just like watching them like in this deeply personal moment that somehow the rest of us get to like be privy to. So yeah, definitely Bollywood dance party.
That would be super fun. Bollywood dance would be cool. I hope you have you guys ever done an event with Kazuo Ishiguro?
We did actually.
What was that like?
We partnered with Pen America, and he was in conversation. His voice is so calming. Like his
Really?
oh
Like
yeah,
ASMR calming?
like it's just like like old like British radio
Okay,
calming.
Jafreen, be honest. Did you fall asleep during this conversation? Is that what you're trying to say?
I was soothed. Um, he's and maybe it like comes with wisdom or age or something. There's this like grace there that I was really just in awe of. He's so smart and his work is so great. And um, it was just like a real honor for us. We partnered with Penn on this, and I had to do the intro and just like my 5 minutes at the beginning. It was just like I was like, why am I here? Like I'm not nearly as important as everybody else here.
Yeah, no,
um,
he's like
but it
one of the
was
big baddies of literature. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
it's great.
yeah, that's super cool. I feel like I always panic whenever people ask me who my favorite writer is because I read a lot. And I love talking about books since I studied literature in college and things like that. And so whenever people ask, I always just say like one or two people because I think if the more I list, the more I feel like I'm gonna miss people. You know what I mean? So I always just say like Kazuo Ishiguro because whenever I read his stuff, it's like I like never know how to explain it, but if you think of writing as a way of transporting your own thoughts into another person's brain, when I'm reading his books, it's the only time I felt like it was so organically written that it felt like I was thinking these thoughts as I read them. Like that's how incredibly precise he was about conveying his ideas and
Yeah.
his sentences. And yeah, every time I read it, I always leave a few days afterwards for like an emotional hangover.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
So
but
I won't ask you who your favorite author is, but
no, you can. I can list a bunch. I'm so excited.
um,
um,
well, what's the last book that you read that you really loved?
I just read this book called The Great Bridge by David McCullough because I love the Brooklyn Bridge. And yeah, that was fascinating. I'm trying to think if I read a book recently by somebody in the workshop. I have like a running list of books, so I can look at it if you want. Um, what I'm really excited to read is I just got the advanced reader copy brag for Nicole Chung's new book, which is coming out next year.
Yeah.
And she's just fantastic, also very lovely as a person. But I remember reading her first book and finding it really like tender and personal. And she writes in a way that's very personable, but uh, it never talks down to the writer, like never always like sort of writes to the top of her intelligence and writes to the top of the reader's intelligence. And I went to a reading, and that was where I met her for the first time in person, I think. And seeing her read her own words out loud was really exciting too. It was, I don't know, I loved it. I'm very, very excited to read that. What was a book you read recently that you really loved?
So I have a rule. This is not related to whether I love the book or not, but
Right.
we have to read a lot. We get a lot of copies of books before they come out, and it's one of the perks of the job. But I'm finding myself like that the line between reading for work and reading for fun was starting to get blurred.
Mm,
So I set a rule for myself that if I was reading something for work, like if I have to introduce somebody or do an event or whatever, I can only read it from like 10 to 5, like business hours.
oh wow, okay, cool.
And if I'm reading something just for myself, and there's overlap between the two, so it's not like a hard and fast rule, but um, it was something that helped me just continue to read leisurely, even when I'm always reading for work. Um,
Mm,
so that said, I mean, two books that I read. So Mayuk Sen has this book that came out last year called Tastemakers, and it's the story of immigrant women that you may not have heard about who have changed the food industry. So people that have written cookbooks or worked with chefs or worked in restaurants. And it's this really just cool reminder of like how immigrants can have and continue to change the world and sometimes go without any recognition.
Yeah.
Um, and there I learned about people that I had never heard about, so that was great. Um, Jamil John Kuchai has a collection of short stories called The Haunting of Haji Hotak, which was
Mhm.
also nominated for a National Book Award. Um, and it was beautiful. It was really, really great, and I really loved it. So those were two kind of far apart, but and different genres that we did read that I really liked.
Ah, that's super cool. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I did a I actually can't remember. I did a book talk for the workshop like a year or two ago, and it was either
Damn.
for yeah, for Pam Jong. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, amazing. Yeah. Wait, that's like one of my favorite books I've ever read, I think. How Much of These Hills is Gold is like just incredible, and obviously Pam is a genius, but I remember reading that book and feeling so transported. And that's actually probably a book where I'm like, oh, this could be adapted so beautifully. Like it would be an incredible miniseries.
Yeah.
Um yeah, fun. This is just a random thing. If you, you can also cut this out. It has nothing to do with the workshop, but I have a running joke with Alexander Chee, who I know has done stuff for the workshop a bunch. We started this running joke that we're cousins online. Um, this is before we had ever met, but just because of our last name, and we're both Korean. And then we're like, oh yeah, we're cousins. And then we went to this event together, and we were like, oh, maybe they'll think we're related, you know. And he was like, oh, maybe they'll think we're like married. We walked in and they went, "Is this your dad?" I was like,
Oh no.
but I was just like, "Yes!" I'm so excited. It's my hot dad.
He is. He's like Asian dad to so many of our writers, I
He
feel.
is. He
Yeah.
really is
Yeah.
Asian dad. He's so supportive and so sweet, and like I remember the first time I met him, I was surprised by how giggly he was, just because his books aren't very giggly, you know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
like, um,
Totally.
yeah, yeah, like if
He
yeah,
comes off as somebody who would be so serious, and then you meet
so
him and he's just like so joyful and so wonderful and like amazing. Yeah.
yeah, and I feel I've never asked him about this, but he strikes me as an optimist, and so it's just so funny. I felt that way also about Chiang Rai because I'd read, native speaker and stuff for college, and he was also very giggly, very joyful, and I was like, oh my gosh, why are your books so dark? Where is this coming from? Oh man,
So I
yeah,
want to go back to you mentioned that you love Ishiguro.
yeah.
Our conversation about kind of adaptations. I mean, I'd love to hear, Never Let Me Go book versus the adaptation, what your thoughts were on that.
Okay, I've actually never seen the movie. I should watch it because I'm a huge Donald Gleason fan, and I know he's in it for like I think a little bit. But there was yeah, but I love the book. I think I've read it maybe 3 times at this point. But that is probably I think that was the first Ishiguro book that I had read.
Mm.
And that was the first time I had that experience of like, oh my God, these these are just such clear thoughts. They're written as if like someone's coding into my brain directly.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on the adaptation? Did you like the movie?
I did. I mean, I liked the book more.
Yeah.
I saw it so long ago. I don't really remember anything specific, but you know how some people are like very weirdly hardlined, like, oh, the movies are terrible.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like this weird form of snobbery that I don't quite get. I'm not, I feel like the more the merrier. Like it's possible to like the book and the movie. Like you don't have to actually pick between the
Yeah.
two. So yeah, no, I liked it, but I did like the book more.
Yeah, yeah, that's super fair. I really like that. I feel that way a lot where when people are very snobby about one thing or the other, it's sort of just like, oh, but they're different mediums, like they're different media. They express things in a different way. They probably showcase some other part that you didn't see. But speaking of Ishiguro, I read Clara and the Sun at the same time that I had seen After Yang by which Kogonada directed. Did you watch or read either of those?
I did read Clara and the Sun. I have not seen After Yang
Oh,
though.
okay, wait, I highly recommend it. It's a really great film. I'm a huge Kogonada freak. I love his stuff. But I happened to randomly read and watch that around the same time, and it really felt like maybe those two creators had had a conversation and then walked away and written and directed their respective works. But when stuff like that happens, because I think they maybe also came out around the same time, I'm always so fascinated by like, oh, there's something in the cultural zeitgeist or like the political landscape that occurred that inspired people to create very parallel
Yeah.
things in different formats. But
I
yeah.
mean, the lowbrow version of that is when that movie Friends with Benefits came out at the
No
same
strings attached.
time.
Oh my gosh. Okay, which one did you prefer? Because I did watch both and I have strong feelings.
So I NSYNC has a piece of my heart, like forever and always.
Okay,
And
okay.
so that includes Justin Timberlake. So Friends with Benefits, like even if it's not even objective, it's just Justin Timberlake's in it, it has to be better.
Right,
Um,
right, right.
but yeah, so that was my vote. What are your strong feelings?
Well, I was just gonna say that was the wrong answer. No, I remember thinking they were both so fun. I prefer movies that are a little slower, just because my brain is slow to comprehend things. And I remember thinking Friends with Benefits was very speedy as a film.
It
Uh,
was speedy and it like dropped these like really serious things like out of nowhere. Like felt like it was this like breezy thing. Then all of a sudden he had this like the tense family stuff and like the dad being sick. And it was like all this stuff just suddenly dropping, which felt tonally weird, but it, Justin Timberlake was in it. So
Wait, is the dad sick in Friends with Benefits?
yeah.
Oh my god, I think the dad is also sick in No Strings Attached.
Of course he is.
Wait, that's so funny. Oh my gosh, yeah. Or
Yeah,
is
it's
there
like,
no mother figure in either movie? Is there a mother figure in Friends with Benefits?
no,
There
there's
is
no,
not.
yeah.
That's incredible. Um, wow, I wonder how that happened.
I know.
Yeah,
And
I
it was
just,
like around the same time too. I want to say like within months of each other, they
yeah,
came. Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I also remember watching it and thinking like, oh, Natalie Portman is so funny. Like they should cast her in funny stuff more. She always plays very serious roles, which she's very good at. But um, yeah, interesting, interesting. Okay, I should ask more questions about the workshop. Okay, what is your like actual day to day when you're working remotely?
So it changes. I mean, we're slowly starting to transition. We hope to reopen fully next year. I go into the office maybe like once or twice a month. Just if I have meetings in the city or, if um, just to check in on the space and make sure everything's okay. But my day to day at home, I get to have a leisurely morning where I'm not commuting into Manhattan, which is great.
That is
And then most of my day is fundraising. So whether that's grant reports, grant proposals, meetings with funders, meetings with partners, a lot of Zoom meetings. Um, if I'm not meeting with people on Zoom, either staff or external partners, then I'm probably writing like a grant proposal of some kind. So we don't have a development team. I do all of our fundraising at the workshop. So it's just a lot of like writing and the process that goes along with that.
That's very cool. Do you do like this is gonna be a hard left turn? Do you do like team bonding exercises with the other staffers? I ask specifically um because everybody is remote. I feel like it might be harder to get to know people. Have you done intentional virtual bonding activities?
So, it's so interesting. More than half of the staff we've hired remotely. We
Oh
haven't
wow.
met in person because we've been rebuilding. And so,
You don't
um,
know how tall they are.
and nobody,
They're all
everybody,
so tall.
everybody sees me and they're like, wow, you're a lot smaller than I thought you would be.
Oh,
I'm under five, I'm 4'11".
4'11". Okay. Wow, you are. Yeah. I
People don't expect that.
Yes, I make it a point on every Zoom meeting to ask how tall everybody is because I like to sort of size people up and see if I could take them in a fight.
Right.
Um, yeah, which
Naturally.
you gotta do, especially if you're gonna hire them. Who's
Correct.
the tallest person on staff?
I haven't even met everybody on staff. So I'm not like in person. We still haven't seen each other. Um, we've got a couple of tall people. I want to say our tallest person is actually she actually recently just left for another job, sadly, but our editor in chief, Jyoti, who had been with the organization for almost 9 years out in Portland, super tall. I think she's the tallest one.
Interesting. I was
Yeah.
gonna say Lily might be the tallest one. Lily gives me
Lily's the,
strong
yeah,
6'3" energy.
totally. Lily has the strongest tall vibes on Zoom.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Very big. is this professional? I would say like big Zoom BDE. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay, Lily just said, oh, 5'2". Ah, I'm almost 5'2", so we're basically the same. We're basically the same height.
It's so funny. That was one of the first things that Lily actually talked about because Lily started a few months after I did. We had known each other. We worked at Penn America together. And then when we were meeting everybody on Zoom, she'd be like, I just don't know how tall everybody is. And it's something I hadn't thought about until first Lily and now you reminded me of it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Listen, you're welcome. It's important to know. I love imagining people in height order. I think it's because I watch The Sound of Music like every month. But like Von Trapp Children style, I have to imagine everyone in the Zoom room in height order to be able to talk to people. Yeah.
But back to your question about team bonding, so because we've all been remote, it's been hard. We've done like a couple of lunches here and there. We would do this thing remember when the pandemic first started and everybody was obsessed with finding like virtual games or virtual icebreakers or like and there's this one app, I can't remember, but it was like a group game app where you all like logged on. House Party. It was called House Party. And you could play like charades or you could play like on your phone. And we used that for a few months, like at staff meetings. We'd be like, all right, let's just like play this game for 20 minutes. And the connection was terrible because the app was not great. Like people would get kicked off half of the time. Like we didn't really know the rules, but it was weird and we were just kind of figuring it out together. There is an icebreaker that has become one of my favorites. I generally hate icebreakers, not a participator by nature.
Okay.
In general, I don't like participating, but there was this icebreaker that our managing editor, Dana, had come up with that we actually have been using a lot, and we should do it. We should.
Okay, yeah. What is it?
What is the last thing that you ate, the last thing that you watched, the last thing that you listened to, and the last thing that you read?
Okay, I got this. So wait, do you want to go first?
You go first.
Okay, so I'm currently drinking this Earl Grey milk boba tea. So that's the last thing that I ate / drank. The last thing that I watched was I rewatched Marcel the Shell with Shoes on the airplane because I was home for Thanksgiving. I watched it on the plane. I just sobbed because this time I knew what was coming, so I cried even before things started to happen. But that is, I think, maybe the best film I've seen this year. Just one of the greatest things I've ever seen. So tender and quietly smart. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. And also I was watching it and I know the creative team behind it isn't Asian, but it felt very Asian to me. And I wonder if it's just that it reminded me of my family because I'm very close with my grandma, but it just felt like, anyway, I loved it. Okay, what did you say last thing I listened to? What did I listen to? I listened to Life Kit, the NPR podcast a lot because I really like podcasts that tell me what to do. I really like directions. So yeah, I listened to that. That was good. And the last thing that I did read the Great Bridge, the David McCullough book. Although I guess more recently I read some subway signs. So that's the most recent one. What about you?
So let me think. The last thing that I ate was my husband and I hosted Thanksgiving last week, and we have leftovers of everything. And for dessert, I made sticky toffee pudding, which is just this really glorious, warm kind of cake made out of dates. So I had that as my afternoon snack.
Nice.
The last thing that I read, I'm in the middle of reading a book by Monica Ali, who wrote the novel Brick Lane years ago. Her recent novel called Love Marriage. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm in the middle of it. So the last thing that I read was pages from that. The last thing that I watched, we had the World Cup on this afternoon. So
which one did you watch? Which game?
We switched between both with a heavier focus on the Argentina-Poland game.
Cool.
I have no team loyalties to anything. I just watch whatever people turn
Just a
up.
loyalty to soccer, the sport.
Exactly,
Sure,
exactly.
cool.
The game, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. I worked off the game.
Exactly. And then the last thing that I listened to was oh, my Spotify Wrapped, which came out today, everybody.
Okay.
Have you looked at your Spotify Wrapped, Karen?
So I actually, this is so embarrassing. I still mostly listen to iTunes. Like I just have, because I have organized it all so well. Every single day of my life, I listen to Billy Joel, and so I really just stick to my iTunes. But who's in your Spotify Wrapped this year?
Mine really tracked. It was like a combination of Bollywood, like like in like South Asian pop music, and because I have two toddler nieces, a good showing from Moana.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes, 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 yes.
yeah.
Interesting. I like that the nieces have sort of taken over your
They've
Spotify.
taken over, yeah, for sure. So it's like it could totally tracks. It's like Bollywood and then like Disney thrown in.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great. Oh my gosh. What's your favorite Disney movie?
Of all time, Beauty and the Beast.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, cool,
I
cool,
really
cool.
identified with Belle, who just like didn't care about anything except her books, and
That's
um
bad.
was afraid of confrontation, so just like stayed with the beast and like
Wait, that's so funny. Yeah, you're right. She is like too non-confrontational.
yeah, I
Yeah,
really identified with that.
yeah, yeah. I
What
wonder if that's why I didn't really like that movie because I am confrontational. um, that's very funny. I grew up without really watching any of the Disney princess movies because my mom was like, these are not good for girls. And all the girls are too passive. So the only Disney princess movie I watched when I was little was Mulan. And so I thought Disney was like Studio Ghibli. Like I thought it was like an Asian company who did Asian people and animal movies. But probably I feel like my favorite has to be either The Lion King or Robin Hood. Yeah, I used to have a huge crush on the fox from Robin Hood, so I might just say Robin Hood.
it's so progressive of your mom of being like these aren't good for girls. You know, the goal is like to get married in the movie of just like to
Yeah.
like find your guy and live happily ever after.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and even like when I think back on it now, like the Little Mermaid is literally just like shut up. You know what they're like, yeah, lose your voice for a hot guy, which obviously I would do now, but as a kid I was like, don't do that.
You learn those mistakes later in life, not
Yeah.
have them ingrained when we are toddlers.
Yes, exactly. Oh man.
So we're almost at time.
Okay.
And one thing that we like to do at the workshop is we like to end every event thinking and talking about joy.
Hmm.
And so I thought maybe we could wrap up with, what it's a weird couple of years, but what has been bringing you joy?
I love this question. What has been bringing me joy? I feel in general, I feel quite happy. I think I every morning I try and wake up early every morning before I have to be doing anything, and I always feel really joyful in the morning, not in like a hyper way, but in like a, oh my God, this day could be so good. And it's really nice when it's very calm. I also really like the early morning in New York because a lot of my family in Korea is still up, and then I can FaceTime my grandparents. So I guess early mornings have been bringing me a lot of joy. Before I ask you the same question, I feel like I should clarify for our viewers that I am not in a sauna. I'm in a phone booth, but this whole time I've been very keenly aware of the fact that it looks like I'm just sweating in a sauna. But back at you, what has been bringing you joy?
The kind of predictable answer would be my nieces, my toddler nieces. They're the best. They're hilarious. They're also the oldest one is she just turned 4 and she is so sassy and so like just hilarious. Like it makes you wonder where do you learn that like how to speak like that. But I love the sass. I love the dance parties. So definitely my nieces. I love that you love mornings because I do too. I feel like I do like my best work happens before 10 a.m. Like the amount of stuff that I can do and feel productive about in the morning, I feel like it like outweighs anything that happens the rest of the day.
Wow.
But I also love New York City in December. I feel like with
Oh,
the lights everywhere, it like empties out because everybody goes away for the holidays or you go somewhere warm, and I like the lights everywhere. And yeah, we don't celebrate Christmas, but I just like as an observer to just like even be in the city and just suddenly have these trees just like lit up in gold is one of my favorite things.
that's amazing. I love that. I really like all the Christmas markets that pop up around the city too.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you don't there's like I never really realized when there's no like official time, but like we were just in the city last week and we were driving back and this like row of trees was just covered in twinkle lights and
Oh, beautiful.
like beautiful.
Yeah,
Great.
I love that. I wish those were up all year round. I feel like that doesn't have to be a Christmas thing.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Oh my gosh. Well, I will wrap things up, but this was such a lovely conversation. I hope we do this every week. And, yeah, what a great time. If anybody's watching, check out aaww.org. Is that correct? Oh, hell yeah. And yeah, I guess email Jafreen any questions you have, including personal questions about her life. Um, and if you email me, I will forward them to Jafreen. Thank you for watching.
Next time we'll do it from a sauna, both of us. We'll be
Yes, yes. We'll be fully nude.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Bye.